excited to be chatting with you today. And I have a special guest. So, someone messaged me this morning and they were like, we didn't see you on Tuesday. Like, what happened? We didn't have our regular Facebook Live. And I was like, I know I had a conflict, but I'm so happy to be here today because we actually have something that we don't normally have, and that is a special guest. So, I'm so excited to talk to you today with someone who is like, I mean, she just fits all, like, she checks all the boxes. Okay. She's a podcast host herself. She's a photographer. She's a branding expert, like so many things. And I just can't wait for you to just get so much out of this conversation now. So for a little backstory, I have Brittany Bennion, and I'm going to bring her on here in a second. And we are going to talk about podcast artwork. This is so important because we're actually going to dive into our own podcast artwork. I asked her, I was like, can we do a little criticism of our own podcast artwork? Because we've done this in the past, we've rebranded. So I'm actually a little nervous because I'm like, I haven't done a full critique of my first artwork and my current artwork. So we're going to do this together. And so, Brittany, give me a thumbs up if you're ready to go. Alrighty, so I'm going to bring her on. Hello. Welcome, lady. How are you?
So good. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So I'm excited to chat with you because I know that all the things that you have done. First of all, okay, we got to start with Reels because this is the most pressing thing that I think
It's super important.
first. So Instagram Reels, y'all have to go follow Brittany on Instagram. Okay. She is at Branding by Britt. And I'm just in love. I'm in love with your Instagram Reels. Every time I see one, I'm like, what is she doing now? I have to go see what she's up to. So I know that's just like a small part of your branding and your expertise and the things that you do, but tell us a little bit about yourself and like how you got into branding and photography and all the things.
Oh, thanks. So my name is Brittany, and I am the host of the Post for Success podcast. We're going to be talking about that today, but I'm also a brand photographer and business strategist. So what does that mean? It means that I get to work with women entrepreneurs who are building their business, and I focus on helping them help teach them how to improve their personal brand and their online visuals so that they can connect with their ideal clients and then turn them into customers and lifelong fans, right? That's kind of what we want all around. How did I get into all of this? I've either ran or owned my own small business for, nearly 15 years. And I feel like that dates me, but there you go. And I also do portraiture work. And so I've kind of married the two of them together. My background is in communication, so I know a ton about public relations, marketing, advertising. It just kind of all fit together. And I am absolutely in love with teaching other people how to do exactly that. So that's kind of about me and how I got started with everything.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. And I love that you share, it's, I think that a lot of people, especially I know we have a lot of either brand new entrepreneurs or online business owners, maybe they're shifting from a brick and mortar business to going online and working with clients. And I think that a lot of people just believe, because this was one of my misunderstandings whenever I first started, that you just woke up one day and said, I really know my stuff about branding. And I think I'm going to be a branding expert and that's what I'm going to do. And I think a lot of people really, because this is what I remember looking at all of my mentors and thinking they must have just woken up and known all these things and learned them all. And you're like, oh, no. This was like a hard fought title that you have. So I want you to talk a little bit about what branding is, like at its core. Let's like break it down to the very basics, because I know there's a lot of people in the audience that are either thinking about starting a podcast or maybe they have and they're wondering, how can I actually stand out? So let's just talk about some of the very basics of branding.
For sure. So it's interesting. A lot of times when we're talking about branding, people say, oh, I've got my logo and my colors and my fonts. I'm good. But let me tell you, you can't just go to Creative Market, buy a template, and think that you have a brand, because those are brand elements and they're totally important to have. But really, what a brand is it's your energy, it's your vibe, and it's how you connect and the experience you provide to your audience. So, the best part about branding is that it doesn't mean that you know, that you can get it right or wrong with your colors or your fonts or your logos. What it means is that it's you. You are your brand. You are what sets you apart. And I always teach that it comes from being your authentic self in your brand, and it allows you to really reach out. You're connecting with people. They want to learn more about you, and you can serve and have a bigger impact in your brand. So, when you're dealing with your brand, it's so important to know it because it gives you clarity about who you are. Remember, we're being authentic. It gives you an understanding of who your audience is, who you're talking to, who your customers are, how you can relate to them. And then it takes away the stress and overwhelm of all the rest of your business. Okay. Because once you have those two things down and you know how it relates to who you are as a personal brand, you can put those branding elements together, and it makes it so much easier for you to create content. Whether it's a podcast, all of the content that you create in a podcast can relate back to who you are in your brand. Your artwork, we're going to talk about podcast artwork, but your artwork and your graphics, the content that you're creating on Instagram or social media or anything like that, it all ties back. It reduces the overwhelm and it creates consistency and intention, which is what your brand is all about: consistency and contention and
Yeah.
intention.
Yes. No, I love this so much because, when I look at, because my background is in marketing. I can't talk today.
Great.
Like, words are hard. Words are hard sometimes. But my background is in marketing. And I remember, in getting started and thinking about my online business, you are absolutely right. I mean, I even know this stuff. I went to school for this stuff, but I was just thinking, okay, I just need to have consistent fonts and colors. Other than that, everything else, like, I'll just kind of figure it out along the way. But oh my gosh, I love what you said about incorporating your personality, your authenticity, like who you are as a person. And you actually had a fantastic conversation yesterday with our good friend Mel, and y'all were talking about social media profile pictures and how
Right.
important it is. Like, if you are trying to make this connection with your audience, and you don't want to have like a stuffy photo that doesn't like invite people to say, "Oh, I really want to talk to that person." They're like, "Oh, there's another like tight suit. Like they look very cold, and like I don't know if I really want to approach them." So I think it's really important to cover those kind of things. But I do want to ask you, whenever you were creating your podcast artwork, and we're actually going to pull it up here in a
Yeah.
little bit, not quite yet, but I want to just know from your background and the things that you thought about, because this is where I find a lot of podcasters get stuck, because they're
Yeah.
like, should I be on the cover? Should I not be on the cover? Do I have to go take a professional photo? Can I just take a selfie and make it work? Like, so what were your thoughts whenever you were in that kind of creation stage? You hadn't launched your podcast yet, but you were thinking about what type of artwork you wanted to have for your show.
Oh, that's such a good question. And it's funny because when you're getting ready to launch your podcast, there's so many different things that you're thinking about at the time. You want to make sure that you have everything lined up so that you actually can go on air. You've got equipment that you're dealing with. You have your content that you want to write. How are you going to market it? And then, of course, there's like, I've got to put a picture up. I have to have my graphic, my artwork. And there's lots of different ways in which you can approach your artwork. And one of the basic questions is, should I have a picture of me on my artwork, or should I have like a graphic or a logo? And it really kind of depends a little bit on, once again, when we talk about your brand, it depends on who it is you're talking to and how you're relating to them. So, for example, if you were maybe doing like a show about like a hobby, like you're a Star Wars fan. I'm a total geek, and I really hate to say that, but I'm a geek. So
I love
you
it.
love it. You love that.
Keep
Um,
going.
um, then maybe if you're like a hobbyist, you talk about that, or fantasy football or something like that, that's the connecting piece to your customers or your audience, that might be a time when you consider using a graphic because you know that that's going to connect with them faster. Okay.
Yeah.
For many, many people who are doing podcasts, a lot of what's going to be the draw from your listenership to you is who you are as a person. Okay. So I think, Crystal, you are the perfect example of this, not only because it's so like meta that you're a podcaster talking about podcasting. I think this is it's always my favorite case study. And um, it's that like, if you were to have put just a graphic of a microphone on there, nobody would care. Nobody would
Yeah.
listen. And I love you. Not to say that your content's not great, because it's fantastic, but it's not drawing somebody into it. All
Right.
right. What draws people in when they're scrolling through like what's new to listen to or what's trending or the suggestions that you get on your podcasting app, what is going to connect them is that they see you. And whether they've seen you from other places and they're like, oh my gosh, that's for sure Crystal's podcast, I'm going to connect with her. It's super, super important. So if you're dealing with something where you're the personality behind the podcast, I highly recommend having your photo on there. Okay. If it's like, we're just talking about like a hobby, I bring on people or something like that, then maybe a graphic works for you. I would never ever recommend putting your logo on it unless people know who you are. Like if you are Apple and you are starting a new podcast, if you are
Right.
Target and you're starting a new podcast, then you can do that. But other than that, people really want to connect with who you are as a person because you're the personality behind the mic. So it's a great way
Yeah.
to do that.
Oh, I love it so much. And I'm thinking, from a creative standpoint, and I'm sure, oh my gosh, if we start going down this rabbit hole, because you're a photographer and you photograph people so well in their natural environments. So I'm thinking, we're sitting here talking about, a picture of you. So what if I was a coach, right? Like, what if I was a life coach and I'm asking, well, that's great, but what kind of pose should I do? Like, how should I position myself? Because I've seen, and like I said, I heard you and Mel talking about this yesterday, and it's so good. And it's the same concept of you have to be able to spot someone's artwork when it's either really big on a screen or when it's itty bitty. So it's not just always really tiny. So you have to have that great high resolution picture, but you also don't want it to be like, grabbing my phone. I'm like, what is that
Right.
thing? Like, what is that in the background? Is she standing in front of a building? Is that a trash can? Because you can't see it
You
very
never
well.
know. Right.
So, do you have any suggestions for someone that's like, I want to be on the cover, but I have no idea where to even begin?
Yeah. So there's an art form to creating awesome podcast artwork. And it all starts with knowing who you're speaking to and what you're speaking about. Okay. So when I talk about branding, we're getting really clear on those two things because that lays the foundation for everything else, any type of content that you're creating, including podcast artwork. So for example, you said the example of like, a coach, right? So you know that you're a coach, and how do you show people that you are a coach, and how do you grab people's attention to have them come into you? Well, a lot of it comes into what type of a coach? Are you a health coach? Are you a life coach? Are you a fitness coach? Because those three things, and I know there's a million other ones out there, a financial coach, your image is going to look totally, totally different. And you want to make sure that your image portrays what it is that you're doing in a split second. Because as people are scrolling, they don't have a lot of time to sit and zoom in on that little tiny picture. Remember, what platform are we listening to podcasts on? They're usually on our phone. And so it's itty bitty teeny tiny. So you want to be able to figure out, what can I do to convey my message quickly, like instantaneously. Okay. So in order to do that, there's a couple of things that you want to do. You don't want to have a picture of you really, really far back and small. Okay. We talked about this in regards to profile pictures with Mel yesterday, because same thing, your profile picture is itty bitty bitty. And if you are not showing a good portion of this face here, then people will not connect with you. People connect with a person's eyes. And that's why you'll see on nearly any podcast artwork, if you're looking through them and you're like, oh, I like this one, I follow this one, oh, this one's really great, you most likely will see that you're seeing the person's face, you're seeing their eyes, and they are of a general good, happy disposition. Okay. A huge thing, a huge factor when it comes to creating good artwork. If you're going to show your face and it's going to be like the main part of your artwork, is that you have to have contrast in it. All right. And this is something that is a little bit different from when we talked about profile pictures, but it's so important with your podcast, because once again, you've got a lot of information going in on that little tiny square, right? You have to have your image, you have to have your title, you have to have, if you've got, a tagline or who you are. There's a lot that goes into this teeny tiny space. So you have to be really, really intentional about having some sort of contrast, something that's going to pop, whether or not you are on a blank background and you're wearing like a dark clothes, or you're wearing something that's a little bit lighter on a dark background. You don't want your background to be all sorts of crazy and busy, because people aren't going to be able to see you, and it's really hard to read those words. So that's another thing that you really have to focus on, Crystal, that I love talking about, is when you're creating your image, you have to make sure that there's what we call white space. And you can see, okay, so you see here on my background, I got my lovely little plant here. This is not white space. Over here is white space. So that's where you can put the words, the title of your podcast, or who it is that you're serving, or what your name is. All right. So you have to be really aware and conscious of that when you're choosing your photo. So if it's super background is like all sorts of crazy, or you're in a weird place, it's so hard to read those words. And those words are super important for you.
Yes. Oh, this is so good. And I think that that's such a great nugget of wisdom to tell people. Like I typically the last time, and we'll talk about this in a second too, I did a photo shoot. First of all, Brittany doesn't live close enough to me. I have had so many conversations where I'm like, I wish that you could come take my pictures,
It's
because
going to
I
happen.
anytime you post pictures of your clients and people you've worked with, I'm like, these are so good. Oh, they're so good. Y'all have to
You're
go
so
follow her
sweet.
on Instagram and just check out her pictures, because they're so great, but they're so positioned well for an online business, or
Mhm.
for using, it's not just a straight direct shot to camera, because you need some white space like you were just
Yeah.
talking about. So for everybody that's watching, everybody that's listening, make sure you think about these things, because they are so super important. And it's really hard if you only have a direct, like you are perfectly in the center. It's hard to work with that. Like
Yeah.
it really is. And I'm sure you've had so many experiences of that. But the text, oh my gosh, y'all, this is one of my biggest pet peeves. If you're trying to put too many words on your podcast artwork, nobody can read them. I feel like people go into this overwhelm mode of I can't read what that is, from an instantaneous glance. And they're like, so I'm just not going to read it.
Yeah.
I'm like,
And you're losing people on that. But that's why your image is so important, because you want to convey that. And like going back to when we're talking about the different types of coaches, okay? Like if your podcast is about fitness coaching, okay, you for sure want to have an image of you in your fitness attire. Either there's certain poses that fitness people do. They're, very open. They're very much showing their body off, which is totally fine, because that's what they're talking about and teaching.
right,
Um, and you want to be able to see that right away. And then that means you don't have to write on the bottom, I coach fitness. Okay.
right.
If you're a finance coach, then you should look a little more suited up, right? You want to have that more approachable, professional look to it. If you have a picture of you in your sweats, nobody's going to really take you seriously for that.
Okay.
And so I love this, because when we get into our podcast artwork, there's some things that I had to really get clear about. Even though I know these things, if we talk about this, even though we know these things, we've got to also apply it to ourselves too. And I made some major shifts and changes in my own podcast artwork because of this.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny because we're going to do mine first. We're actually going to get into that next. We're going to do mine first. And I want to tell the story behind it because I think that that's important that, like I said, I already know a lot of these things. And so it was like I was halfway there. It's like I got halfway with knowing some of the basics behind marketing and psychology and colors and different things. But at the same time, I feel like I missed the mark on my first podcast, but also even on my current, like, so this is like news flash. I'm actually going to be changing my podcast artwork. And so, but I also wanted to have Brittany on to share about both of our stories with our shows to let you know if you're a brand new podcaster or you've been podcasting for a while and you've been thinking about changing things up, it's okay. Again, it's not something you should do very often because you want that branding to be sticky where people see it and they're like, oh, Brittany put a new show out today. Let me go listen to it. Or if you see, a soundbite on Instagram and you're like, oh, I recognize, oh, that must mean she's got a new episode. Like you want that to stick. But also, if things are changing, if your show takes a different pivot, then you can change it. You can change it. So I actually want to get into why you changed yours. But first, we're going to talk about mine real fast. I'm
All
a little
right.
nervous.
Sounds good.
Oh, like, I did some critiques the other day for some other people. And now I'm like, oh, I feel like I'm putting myself in the hot seat. So I'm like, and if you're watching and y'all have any questions or you wanted like any specific questions about podcast artwork or branding, go ahead and put them in the comments because Brittany and I will be able to answer them as we're sitting here chatting. So y'all let us know if y'all have any questions. Okay, so here we go. Are you
Let's
ready? I'm
dive
like,
into this.
oh. Okay. So I'll go first. I'm like, I'll give you my critiques first. Um, the first thing that I do like, let's do like the compliment sandwich, right? Like, what's a good
Deal.
thing? We can work on this. And then here's another good thing. The first thing is I love that I'm looking directly at the camera. That is something that I really wanted to convey with this picture. These are still colors that were pretty on brand for me. This is actually where I got so much of my branding. Like what I use today is still a variation of this color. So I like that. I was holding a coffee mug. First of all, I'm at my parents' house. Okay. This is my parents' front porch. It's out in the country. I love that it was outside because it kind of tells the story of who I am. I love being outside.
Mhm.
I love drinking coffee, even though I'm pretty sure that mug says something about it's like my mom's like a grandma mug. So
I love
so
my
I'm really covering
grandbabies.
it up. I'm like, this is my grandma mug that I'm drinking. Um, but I don't love the text on it. I don't love, I don't know. There's a lot of things that I feel like could be different. And I told Brittany this yesterday, but I'm wearing glasses, y'all. I literally just wear glasses to watch TV and drive at night. Like that's it. It's like very few and far between that I actually wear glasses when I'm doing anything. So I think I wore those because I'm like, oh, I want to look smart and I want to use this. So it was not on brand, going back to what Brittany said about authenticity. And then the last thing I'll say is I like the jewelry that I'm wearing because I love James Avery. And those are some pieces that my husband has given me. So other than that, that's all I have. So I want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying. I love that I can see your face. When I see this, I'm instantly drawn in and I'm like, okay, she seems super approachable and relatable. You've got this coffee mug. I feel like I'm sitting down with you just to have a chat. And I think that that's kind of that's totally on brand for you, right?
Yeah.
You are very much like, we're going to talk about it. We're going to be real. We're just girlfriends hanging out, but we're going to talk business. Okay. So I do really like that. And I love that you're wearing your brand colors because that's really kind of important because that draws me into to the image. Although I don't think I've ever seen you wear a shirt like this. So going back on to like, I don't have glasses that I wear often. Your style is a little more like casual and connected instead
Mhm.
of, like you said, you feel like I have to have a good picture. And here I am. Um,
Yes.
so I feel like maybe there's a little bit of disconnection, but this is not a terrible piece of podcast artwork. Your font I can see it's really, really big, so I can instantly read it. I'd be a little bit careful about like the sides. You have to be careful, and you teach this too with
Yeah.
your text. You kind of want to have everything more towards the center middle, um, just in case things get cropped off and whatnot like that. But if I looked at this, I'm like, the rookie life with Crystal Profit, great, beautiful. What's in it for me?
What
Why
does
would I
that mean?
even see that? Yeah. So that's what I say. It's really great, but there's something that you can improve on for sure.
For sure. And I think that that was my biggest reason. Not only did I rebrand, so if anybody's watching this, they're like, why are we looking at this? This is my original podcast. Like, this was when I started. This is what my show was called. And that was one of the biggest disconnects that I had in trying to get new listeners onto the show because they would look at this and be like, what does that mean? Like, is she like an athlete, like a
Mhm.
rookie athlete kind of thing? Was she a professional athlete? Like, I got a lot of questions about being an athlete. And so I was like, okay, it's not very clear in just looking
Right.
at it. So I do applaud, the approachableness and like I hit that spot on, but it's not clear what this show is actually about. So I really wanted to bring that up. And yeah,
Right.
it's funny you say that because yeah, this shirt, I never wear button downs, y'all. I don't like
I've never
ever.
seen you in one.
I have one or two, and it's basically like a casual one that I will wear when I do my YouTube videos. I'll wear like a tank top, and then I'll throw a shirt on
Yeah.
over the top just to kind of film another video, and then I take it right off. I'm like, I don't do well in button ups. Oh my gosh. Okay, so the next one is my current one. So again, I'll go first with this one. So I have this shirt. So these are the two shirts that I have that are in my brand colors. The first one is a lighter one. This one is, and I honestly, I may have worn this shirt one other time besides this photo shoot.
Yeah, but
So
this feels so much more you though, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. With this one, so I did have a photographer that took pictures of me. She came to my house and it was a really cool photo shoot. And I wanted to, bring in some elements of what I do. And so this is what she did. And I love this picture because to me, it shows my passion for podcasting. So it's not just, oh, I have a microphone in the background. Like, what does she do? Like, I was actively talking, I was actively doing what I love. And I do like the fist up because I do this. Like I talk with my hands. I'm very into it whenever I podcast. But my biggest critique about this picture is I'm not looking at the camera. I'm not
Mhm.
looking at it. And I looked through other photos that I did during this photo shoot, and there's really not a ton that was a great picture of what I actually do or what it
Right.
looks like when I'm recording. So that's my biggest critique. I'm not crazy still about you talked about contrast. I don't feel like there's enough pop of either me or the text coming off of the artwork. And that's just a preference for me. I don't really love
Mhm.
the fonts either. I don't know. I just feel like it could be better. But again, going back to we all have to start somewhere, right? That's the motto
Yep.
around here. You got to get going with something. This was the rebrand picture that I chose, and it's what I've been using for more than a year. It's almost a year and a half of this version of the podcast. So that's
Right.
my backstory. I want to
And
hear what you have to say.
it's totally been serving you. Yeah, I think that this is great because all of a sudden I see this image and I'm like, yes, I know what she's doing. I
Yeah.
do, like I said, you're unique because I don't think that anybody else should have a microphone and podcasting equipment in their podcast artwork unless you are talking about podcasting. Okay.
Right.
Because guess what? If they're seeing your artwork, they know that you're on a podcast. Like that's what they're there for. Okay. Don't waste that space and valuable time saying that I have a podcast about this. Okay. The other thing too is that it's a great action photo. I can see your passion. I can see your excitement for it. I can see that you're engaged with podcasting, but I do want you to be engaged with me in some
Yeah.
sort of fashion. And you totally know that. You're like, oh, I get this. And you're right. There isn't a ton of contrast specifically like between your hair and your shelving in the background. So
Yeah.
there is something that I love. I know you've talked a lot about how you use Canva, and Canva has just come out with a ton of podcast templates. And I've been like following what you've had to say about this. But one really great thing about Canva, and it's, I think only in the pro version, is that you can do a background remover. And I'll show you in my thing. I used Canva for my background remover because it allowed me to pop a little bit more. And so that would be something I would say. If you're like, I really don't have a great photo that doesn't have a distracting background, maybe try out that and see if that helps you to stand out. And it's true. I would say about your text, it 100% aligns more with what you talk about. And you do have like the best last name ever, right? It's so fortunate. And then, but I would maybe look at the font you're using for start, launch, and market.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that staying away from some certain types of fonts that maybe feel more like Comic Sans font, that it's a little dating. Oh, I don't mean to like that's my only harsh critique on this one. That
No, it's great.
dating. But
It's
I
great
love it. Yeah.
Because in looking at it, that's one of the things that I'm like, I really want to change that. And like, I don't really say this, and I think that it's great to have these types of conversations. That's like, oh, I don't really want to tell you. But at the same time, the branding behind it matters, because even if I love this, right? And like, this is for everybody to hear, even if you love it, you need to get outside opinion from people. And like, here's the caveat to that, right? Not just your friends and family, from people that actually will listen to your show, or that will actually be customers, because this is really, because they're the ones that matter. It's your listeners, it's your audience, it's the people that you're trying to bring into your sphere to get to know you and to listen to your show. I think that that's totally spot on. And I think that, I mean, I have so many other ideas. Brittany and I will have to talk off air about all the ways that I'm like, oh, we could do this. Basically, it's going to involve Brittany has to fly to Texas, which, by the way, she's in Michigan. Like, you have to fly to Texas and take pictures for me, because that would just solve all of my branding problems. So, I mean,
Done. Let's do it.
Okay, but I'm glad that you brought this up, because I was actually going to ask you, before we move on to yours, I was going to ask you about the background remover, because I've seen that's like really been trending on podcast artwork. And my only question is for the background. So if someone removes the background, do you think that they need to just have a total white space behind them? Do they need to have a pattern background? I know it's probably going to vary based on the person to person, podcast to podcast, but do you have any suggestions for someone who's like, I think I want to try that, but once I remove the background, like what do I do?
Right. So when you remove the background, it gets a little tricky, because then it starts to look like clip art. Remember, like back in the 1990s when the internet was first invented, you had clip art and it just looks like you just put a sticker on it. And that's not what you want to have. So my go-to trick is in Canva. If you, I think it's under elements, if you search the word gradient, it pulls up a box, and I think it's defaulted to purple. It's like purple to clear. If you take that gradient box and put that on your background, what it does, and I'll show you, because this is exactly what I do in my podcast artwork, but it doesn't make it so you look like a sticker right on top of your image or your background, because your lighting is most likely not going to match, but the gradient smooths it out and it makes it look like that. So for example, look here in my background, you can see that like there's a gradient. Let's see this side. It's backwards for me, but you can see it's really bright over here. And then it starts to soften out, that it gets a little bit darker off to the side. This side's a little bit darker. That's usually what happens in a picture. And when you have the background remover and you just stick a solid color behind it, it just looks like the light's coming straight at you, but most light has some sort of dimension on you. So the gradient kind of balances that out. So that's my hack, is look for the gradient and use that.
I love it so much. I love it so much. Okay, so we are going to move on to your first podcast artwork. So this, and I think that we mentioned this earlier, but Brittany has the Pose for Success podcast. So y'all have to go check it out. It's so good. All tips for branding, photography, and actually, I have listened to so many tips about website design, like how to use your pictures on your website. Like that, I think it was one specific episode I listened to that helped me rethink like pictures for my website and social media. So I just wanted to give you a little shout out for
Oh,
that.
thank you. I'm so glad it was helpful. Yeah,
So good.
for sure.
Yes.
So, like you said, we all have to start somewhere. And I don't feel like this artwork was terrible, but I did need to improve on it. I wasn't in love with it, and so we made some changes. I had this for about the first 8 months, I think, of my podcast. So, um, things here, everything we talked about, it's
Yeah.
really kind of a cluttered photo. Okay. I do have my camera in there because I talk a lot about pictures and the visual aspects of your business. So like bringing that in is a really good thing for you to see, but you're not connecting to me. You don't see my eyes. I'm looking down. And so what this conveys is like, I'm more interested in my camera than I am in you. And you don't
Right.
ever want that because people, when they're looking at things, um, I hate when I say this, but like we are naturally, in the kindest way possible, selfish people. And when we're looking for ways to fill our time, our primitive brain says, well, what's in this for me? And if my message is not saying what's in this for you, then you're not going to connect and relate to it. So definitely, you'll see what I've done in my next image is I'm looking straight at the camera and connecting with you. The other thing too is I so my brand colors, right? I do have this navy a lot in my brand colors, but it's like my accent color. And so
Okay.
so we don't see it a lot. This just overall look is not the look that I generally have for my brand. So when you go from like my website or my Facebook or my Instagram and then you see this, there was a disconnect. And that's really what we want to avoid in branding ourselves is we want to feel like it's a seamless transition so you instantly know who you're talking to or who it is that you're looking for, right? Because if you go onto your when you're searching a podcast, there's like, all the suggestions and a million different people and they all have, similar names. You really want it to be like, oh yeah, I'm for sure know that this is Brittany's podcast because it looks similar across the board.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And the thing that I notice whenever, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like whenever you first started your show, it was about more the photography side of things. Like you hadn't really stepped more into the branding stuff that you do today. Is that right?
Yeah.
Am I thinking there was an
No,
evolution of your show?
definitely an evolution. I talked a lot about like what it is to use your camera and a lot of the techniques behind it, which is super valuable. But I knew that I didn't want to talk only to photographers.
Right.
It wasn't a photography podcast.
Yeah.
And this really made it look like it was a photography
Mhm.
podcast.
Yeah, that's like the only thing that I would say is like, not looking at the camera takes away because you're gonna love her current one. I love it so much. I love this picture of you for many reasons, and we'll get to that. But in this one, you're right. It does. It seems like it's all about the camera. It's all about you're enjoying something that you've created. Again, going back to it's like a multi-layered like selfishness. That's like like you said, we all have that, but
Mhm.
I'm more interested in what's going on here than actually carrying on the conversation with you. So,
Right.
with that note, I'm so excited. I love this. I love this. And I'm going to go first on this one because I'm selfish and I want to tell you all the beautiful things that I love about this. So, first and foremost, I love that you're looking at the camera and I love like whatever this pose is with your jacket. I feel like
Mhm.
it's a little sassy and I love it.
Mhm.
I love it so much. When I first saw this, I was like, oh, this is Brittany.
Yeah.
That's really what I thought. I was like, this looks like the person that I know because I already knew you at this point, you know? And just I just felt like, "Oh, this is her. This is her. The first one was good, but this is who she really is." So tell us all your thoughts about this.
Oh, you're so sweet. But yeah, it's got a little bit of sass to it, but I feel like it relates more to who I'm speaking to. So I'm speaking to women entrepreneurs, not just women entrepreneurs that have a camera in their hand, because most people do have a camera, but it is dusty and sitting off on their shelf, okay? But I also feel like I get fired up sometimes when I podcast. So I wanted to show that about me. Um I feel like the image connects directly with my title because you can tell that this is like very much a pose, okay? And we've talked about this in the past, Crystal. You are the one who came up with the title for my podcast and I will forever be grateful for it because I'm talking about how you can position yourself literally as your brand to be successful. And
Yeah.
I talk so much about like literally your body. So I love that we did Posed for Success. So this is very much a posed look. I'm speaking to women who want to have success in their business. That's why I really like that I have the blazer on, but I'm all sorts of like a kickback girl. So that's why I've paired it with jeans. You can tell that I take myself seriously, but not too seriously. So it was really like a confident pose for me. So when we talk about images, if you're looking for your images, what message you're conveying, our body language is so important. Okay. So in the previous photo, you see I'm like hunched down. I don't know if you can hear me if I'm by my mic. I'll turn this way.
Yeah, you're
I'm
good.
hunched down
Good.
a little bit. My back shoulder's like pulled in, my face is down. And what is this conveying a message of success? No, absolutely not. So in my new photo, I'm standing straight up. My shoulders are open right here. I have my hands here. They're not crossed, they're not closed. They're right here in like a firm position. But I also, because I speak to women specifically, you can see that like I've got my leg crossed. It's showing like my hourglass shape. This was pre-COVID, everybody, by the way. So you can see I'm relating to women in this way. Um,
Yeah.
and this we talk about the gradient. You can totally now I've told you my secret, you can see my gradient background, huh?
So what was the background of this picture?
It was actually just like a white brick wall. So
Okay.
um it was super easy for me to remove the background. And the other thing too, and this is getting super technical with your photo, but the light is coming directly on me. Okay. So
Okay.
I don't have, you can see very, very softly in my image right now, or in my video. You can see right, oh, here we go. Right there. I've got this harsh shadow behind my head right here. So that's telling you that the light is coming in from this direction. Okay. You can also see it on this side of my nose. Okay.
Mhm.
Sorry, it's backwards.
Like right
But
here.
yeah, right here. So you can see that the light is coming in from this direction. And if you look here in my actual image, most of the light generally it's a straight on, it's what we call flat light. Um, you can't see shadows around my nose or necessarily even around my chin. If you look just to the very left bottom of my chin, you can see that there's a slight shadow. Or if you look in my eyes, and I know podcast art's really, really small, so this is, guys, super technical. You can see that the direction the light's coming in. So that's why that side of the gradient is lighter, closer to the words, and back behind me is darker. It just follows the light and it makes the image look natural. It doesn't look
Right.
like a sticker.
Yeah. No, and it looks like I was actually going to ask you, I meant to ask you this before. I was like, "Oh, where did you take this? Where did you find a wall that like perfectly matches?" It does. It looks like
It
you're
does.
standing in front of a wall in your house in an office building somewhere that
Mhm.
perfectly matches what you're wearing. So that's awesome. Did you do like and this we are going to get geeky for a second. Did you do the eyedropper or like a color match
Yeah.
of your clothing to make that gradient?
Yeah, you can see it matches my shirt, which is my brand color. So this like really pops with my brand color. I use this kind of peachy pink everywhere in my content creation and on my website. So it very much more aligns with it. And then you see the gold, which I used from my old podcast artwork, but it fits a lot better in here. If we want to jump into color theory too, anytime you're using gold, it does like have bring up emotions of wealth and success, which is why it's one of my brand colors. And that's why I wanted to make sure it was on the podcast artwork.
Yes, because you're posed for success.
Hope for
Oh my gosh, I
success.
love it. I love it so much.
Yeah.
And I think that, like I said, from someone who knows you, I listen to your show, like this is just like, oh, that's really Brittany. Like that's
Mhm.
really who she is. And you can just see it, it pops. And I'm so grateful for this conversation
Yeah.
today because, honestly, I knew that I wanted Brittany to come and talk about podcast artwork, but it was kind of last minute that I was like, let's critique our own
Yeah.
stuff. She was like, Okay, like let's make it happen." But this was even so much better. This was helpful for me. I know that there's people watching and their mind is probably blown just about the removal of the background and the gradient. But I want to talk about, you have a free training coming up that actually dives even deeper into branding for your business. And so tell us a little bit about that. And I'm going to tell everybody where they can go and sign up for it, because I don't want them to miss this free training. So tell us a little bit about what you have going on.
Oh, thank you. So, if you've been listening to today's training and you're like, that makes so much sense. How can I learn more about what it means to actually build a brand and a personal brand? I do have a free training and it's going down live today. So it's something you don't want to delay. You can register. And I know we've got all that information right here. You can come. It's brittbennion.com/attract. And that's how you can register. You do have to register to be able to come see it, but it's a 1 hour free training. And I'm talking about how you're going to use personal branding and the 3 secret steps that you need to know in order to attract more clients. And that's kind of what we've talked a lot about today. In regards to podcast artwork, you want to attract your audience. You want to attract more listenership. And it comes down to making sure you have intention and consistency. We're going to talk all about that. So if you want to learn a little bit more, dive into it. It's totally free. And for whoever shows up live, I do have an amazing free resource for you. It is the ultimate personal branding guide, resource guide. And I just kind of list out everything that I use. If you liked that Canva tip, then you're going to love this. It tells you locations, props, wardrobes, equipment, design tools, anything and everything that I use in my business and I give to my one-on-one clients. So you get that totally for free.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. Y'all go sign up for this training. Like she knows her stuff. And I have learned so many things about, like I said, I have a background in marketing and I should know a lot of these things, but y'all, there's so many things that one are not taught in higher education. And two, you don't know that you need until you have an online business and you
Right.
start exploring these worlds. Like, y'all, they're not teaching Instagram reels and how to do them so well like Brittany does anywhere else. Okay. Like, I'm just telling you, it's not something you learned in school. And I think that the branding aspect of the consistency from going from one platform to the next. So I do want you to talk about that real fast because I think that that's important. And this is
Mhm.
something that you and Melanie were speaking about on another live yesterday. So, do you have any tips for people that are watching and they're like, okay, I want to have a connection with my people on all platforms, but I don't really know if I should use the same image for my picture or if I should have, like you were talking about, the same colors for every picture. Like, give us a little information on what your thoughts are on platform switching. I guess we could call
Mhm.
it that. But
Yeah.
what do you think about
Platform
that?
hopping. It's a thing and people
Yeah.
do it because you probably do it too. Like you're on Instagram and then you flip over to Facebook or you find something on Pinterest and you want to learn more, connect with them on a different platform. So people platform hop and uh we also get really easily distracted. So when you're building a brand, what it's trying to do is create such a recognition in your ideal client's brain that they know who you are wherever they see you and whenever they see you. And they should be able to say, oh my gosh, instantly I know that that's Crystal. And Crystal, you do an amazing job at this. I feel like whenever I see, like if I'm scrolling through Facebook or even Instagram, I'm like, oh, that's Crystal. She's good. She's using your brand color. She's using your same font. She's being really repetitive, which is so important. And so when it comes to like our images, your people have a limited attention span and limited brain space that they're going to dedicate to trying to find you. So think
Sure.
about when you're going from, like, you've just watched one of your YouTube videos and then you're like, okay, I want to go check out her stuff on Instagram. You go over to Instagram and then you are instantly flooded with a million other options and choices. And so what's going to keep somebody from not being distracted by all of these things? It's going to be that it's super easy for them to go from Crystal on YouTube to Crystal on Instagram. You're the same person. You've got very similar, if not the exact same images that you're using across platforms. We talked about picture profiles, and I really like that if you use nearly the same image across your platforms. Or because that's what it is. You just don't want them to be distracted. You want to be like, okay, I'm going from Crystal to Crystal. If they're going from, Crystal with her amazing like green and black branding over here, and Crystal looks like she's doing red and blue and purple, people are gonna be like, is that
Right.
Crystal? Is
Right.
it not? And then they get distracted. So
Right.
it's
Yeah.
super important.
And it's funny too, because, when you're looking for someone on Instagram, you type in their name and then like 50, Brit Binions pop up and you're like, which one is it? Like,
Which
which
one?
one? And you don't have like, that's not a super popular like first and
Yeah,
last name, but it's like Jane Smith and it's like, oh, there's like 50 of them.
there's a
Which
million.
one is it? And then you're like really confused. And I think it's that analysis paralysis that your brain just shuts down. They're like, oh, well, I'll find her later. I'll just look for it later.
Exactly. And you don't, that's not what you want. You want to keep them for as long as possible because that's when you're building trust with them. And so
Yeah.
if you can instantly say, "Oh yeah, I know that that's her because it's literally the same picture," or like everything she does is orange and this is all orange, that
Yeah.
colors are important when it comes to that. But your face is even more important. That's what we talked about today.
Yes. Oh my gosh. This was so helpful. So helpful. So, where can everybody find you if they want to connect with you? I'm going to put your information for your podcast up here, but is there any other place that you'd like to connect with anybody that wants to know more about what it is that you do?
Oh, this is perfect right here. So you can hear, I'm the host of the Pose for Success podcast. I talk all things personal branding. So if you want to deep dive into that 100%, go ahead and subscribe and listen. I'm a student of Crystal, so it's good because Crystal's taught me everything I know. Or you can find me on Instagram, Branding by Britt. You talked about my reels, guys. These are seriously so fun to do. And you've inspired me. I think I'm going to make a reel. We'll make a reel right after this and I'll dedicate it to you. How does that sound, Crystal?
Oh, yes. Oh, I feel like my life is complete. That's gonna make my like, there I have Branding by Brit reel dedicated to me. Y'all, they are so good. They're so funny. They're so relatable. As you have to go find the one with no music. There's no music. There's nothing going on. But you and that's all I'm gonna give away. I'm not gonna give
Don't
away
give
the
it
rest
away.
of it because
Don't give it away.
I died laughing. I watched it like 10 times and I had to share it. I was like, she's done it again. This is incredible. So go find Brittany on Instagram. Go check out her reels, but sign up for her masterclass because it is today. And if anybody is like, oh man, like I have something going on, would they be able to sign up and catch a replay or like how does that work?
Right. So if you cannot make it and you're like, I'm dying to know this information, go ahead and register anyways, because what it does is it allows me to send you the replay and all of the information and details that you need to know. So it's super important that you register, whether or not you can see it. I promise tomorrow you'll be able to watch it.
Yes, awesome. Y'all, I'm so grateful. I always love chatting with you, but I'm so glad that we got to dive into all the things podcast artwork and you shared with us your behind the scenes secrets because that was really fun to hear
Oh,
all.
thank
I'm
you.
like, I have so many ideas now. I'm like, oh, I'm going to change my artwork and I'm going to do fun things, but I'll have to have a big unveiling of my new podcast artwork
Ooh,
whenever it
that would be
happens.
so exciting. Yeah, we'll definitely have to do a brainstorm session. It would be
Yeah.
my honor, but thank you
Oh my
so,
God.
so much.
Thank you so much for being here today. Bye, Brett.
Have a good one.
Oh my gosh, y'all. This was so fantastic. I'm telling you, go listen to Brittany's podcast. Go sign up for her masterclass because I have learned just so many things in conversations with her ideas behind branding, how branding works. Like she was saying, like across social media platforms, from your website to Instagram to Pinterest. Like you want to have a fluid conversation with your audience that tells them, yes, I'm the expert. Yes, I know what I'm talking about. And yes, I'm the same person on Instagram that you see on YouTube or on Facebook or wherever they're following you. So please go sign up for Brittany's masterclass. She was actually on a recent episode of the Profit Podcast as well. So if you want to hear more about a conversation of her behind the scenes podcast journey, make sure you go listen to that. But that's all I have for you today, guys. Y'all have a fantastic day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.